Hello, and welcome back to the William Gomes podcast. I am William Gomes, and I'm grateful to have you here. This series is called Reading Seminar 1 and 2, Lacan's Return to Freud Revisited. In the previous episode, we examined technique as an ethical position. We saw why Jacques Lacan insists that analytic technique cannot be reduced to a set of methods or procedures, but must be understood as a position taken in relation to speech, desire, and truth. In this episode, we arrive at a decisive turning point in the series. If technique is ethical, and if psychoanalysis must refuse the position of mastery, then we must ask a difficult question. What within psychoanalytic theory and practice most strongly seeks mastery? Lacan's answer is unequivocal. It is the ego. To understand why the ego becomes the central problem of Seminar 2, we need to situate it within the broader history of psychoanalysis after Sigmund Freud. Following Freud's death, psychoanalysis increasingly oriented itself toward what came to be known as ego psychology. Within this framework, the ego was treated as the organizing center of the personality. It was responsible for reality testing, adaptation, and integration. A strong ego was seen as the goal of analysis. The task of the analyst on this view was to support the ego, reduce conflict, and help the individual function more effectively in the world. At first glance, this orientation appears compatible with Freud. Freud did, after all, speak of the ego, and he did not deny the importance of adaptation to reality. But Lacan insists that something fundamental has been misunderstood. For Freud, the ego was never the master of a psychic life. On the contrary, Freud's most radical claim was that the ego is not master in its own house. The ego, for Freud, is a defensive formation. It negotiates compromises. It protects the subject from conflict. It is necessary, but it is not sovereign. Ego psychology, according to Lacan, reverses this insight. Instead of treating the ego as a problem, it treats the ego as a solution. Instead of seeing the ego as an effect of conflict, it treats the ego as the agent that resolves conflict. This reversal has profound consequence for analytic theory and technique. When the ego becomes the center of analysis, the unconscious is displaced. Desire is subordinated to adaptation, and analysis becomes a project of strengthening identity rather than questioning it. This is why Lacan targets the ego so directly in Seminar 2. The ego is not simply another concept among others. It is a theoretical temptation. It offers coherence where psychoanalysis discovers division. It offers mastery where Freud discovered conflict. It offers stability where analytic work requires uncertainty. Lacan does not deny that the ego exists. He denies that it can serve as the foundation of psychoanalysis. For Lacan, the ego is fundamentally an illusion of mastery. It presents the subject with an image of themselves as unified, intentional, and self-transparent. This image is deeply compelling. It allows the subject to say, I am this, I know what I want, I understand myself. But this image is produced through identification. It is not discovered, it is constructed. This is why Lacan insists that the ego belongs to what he will later formalize as the imaginary register. It is organized around images, coherence, and misrecognition. The ego misrecognizes the subject by presenting a stable identity where there is a structural division. This misrecognition is not an accident. It is necessary. Without it, psychic life would be unlivable. But when psychoanalysis takes the ego as its guide, it mistakes misrecognition for truth. This is the core of Lacan's critique. When analysis aims to strengthen the ego, it reinforces the very structure that resists the unconscious. It supports the subject's defenses rather than interrogating them. This does not mean that ego strength is always harmful. It means that ego strength is not the aim of analysis. If analysis reinforces the ego, it may produce stability, but it does so at the cost of analytic truth. This is why Lacan insists that the ego is not the subject. The subject of psychoanalysis is not the conscious I who speaks coherently about themselves. It is the divided subject who appears in slips, contradictions, repetitions, and symptoms. By placing the ego at the center, ego psychology transforms psychoanalysis into a psychology of the self. Lacan's return to Freud resists this transformation. Seminar I prepares this move by focusing on speech, truth, transference, and interpretation. Seminar 2 makes it explicit by placing the ego under theoretical scrutiny. The transition between the two seminars is therefore not a break, but a deepening. Seminar I shows why technique must be oriented toward speech rather than adaptation. Seminar 2 shows why the ego cannot serve as the foundation of that technique. This is also why Lacan insists that the ego problem is not merely theoretical. It has direct clinical consequences. When the analyst addresses the ego, they speak to the subject's image of themselves. They reinforce narratives, identities, and explanations. When the analyst listens beyond the ego, they allow speech to destabilize those images and reveal something of the subject's division. This distinction will guide the rest of Seminar 2. In the next episode, we will take this argument further by drawing a precise distinction between the ego and the subject of the unconscious. We will examine why confusing the two leads to theoretical and clinical dead ends, and why analysis cannot work directly on the ego without betraying its own logic. Thank you for listening. This is the William Gomes podcast. Take care of yourself, stay curious, and if you found this episode helpful, you're very welcome to follow, share, leave a comment, or a rating. I'll speak with you again soon.